Thank you for joining us for the fourth video in our Solstice product training series. In this video, we will provide a comprehensive overview of what is involved with deploying Solstice in an enterprise environment. This video is designed for both Mersive partners as well as end users, because Solstice is, at its core, a network-attached device which leverages the customer's existing IT network infrastructure and therefore needs to have the proper network configuration from the time of the initial deployment. This video will help to ensure a timely and efficient installation and the best possible user experience. In order for a deployment to be successful, Solstice pods and Windows software hosts must be attached to the enterprise network and configured correctly. Solstice offers a large degree of network flexibility to meet the requirements of a broad range of use cases and IT policies. These configuration options should be set to match the use case and network requirements specific to the deployment. Let's take a look at what it means to deploy Solstice on the enterprise network. These are the most important elements of a successful deployment. The first step is attaching Solstice to the network. Different organizations have different network configuration profiles, from a single enterprise network to multiple subnets and VLANs, or a guest network. The first step in deploying Solstice is to determine how to attach Solstice to the network. Second, ensure the required network ports are opened. Solstice traffic must be allowed on the network, which means certain network ports must be opened. The default Solstice base ports are 53100 through 53102. However, these can be changed if needed. The third step is to configure network security and user access control. Decide what security features are required on the network, such as network encryption of Solstice traffic, as well as what user security model you'd like to implement to prevent unauthorized users from accessing the Solstice displays. Step 4 is to set up display discovery. This is how users will find and connect to the Solstice displays from their laptops and mobile devices. The last step is to validate Solstice is fully operational on the network. Connect and share content from a few different devices to ensure Solstice is ready for use by meeting participants. Before you deploy, the first thing we suggest you do is become familiar with the deployment resources available from Mersive. Please review the following documents in the Mersive Customer Support Portal, and also feel free to contact Mersive Support with any specific questions you have. Deployment docs. We have a deployment quick start guide, network deployment guides for both the pod and the Windows software versions, as well as Solstice Baseline Security Standards, or BSS, for security-sensitive deployment environments. The second thing we highly recommend you do before you start deployment is to contact the customer's IT team. This is especially important for large enterprise deployments. Because Solstice leverages the customer's host IT network, it's important that Solstice is deployed and configured to meet the network and security requirements of the customer's IT policies. You may also need the IT team's assistance to open ports on the network, which we cover in detail later in this video. Lastly, we encourage you to let Mersive know if you have a deployment coming up. That way we can assist however possible. We're happy to schedule a pre-deployment meeting to cover specifics of the project, and if we know you have a large deployment, we'll stage support resources for the deployment timeframe in order to answer questions and provide assistance as needed while the deployment is in progress. To schedule a deployment with Mersive, visit mersive.com and select Schedule a Meeting in the bottom right-hand corner of the website. Taking these 3 steps before your deployment should reduce the chances of major surprises on deployment day and increase the likelihood of a smooth deployment process. Steps to deploying Solstice. When it comes to the actual deployment, we've broken down the deployment process into 5 primary elements. The first step is to determine how best to attach to the host network. For example, does the customer require access for both guests and hosts? Second, ensure the necessary network ports are open, and open ports as required. Consult with customer's IT team for this step. Next, configure user and network security settings. Enable network encryption and designate the user access security model. Fourth, set up display discovery on the network so users can connect to the Solstice displays on the network. And finally, verify that Solstice is fully up and running, ready for end users. Let's take a close look at each step, including how and where to update the settings. Solstice enables users to share content via Wi-Fi or Ethernet networks to the shared Solstice display in the meeting room. To do so, the Solstice pod or Windows software host PC must be attached to the host network that users have access to from their laptops and mobile devices. The question is, how will the Solstice pods or Windows software hosts be attached to the host network? For Solstice Windows software host, Solstice inherits the network access of the Windows host PC. Simply ensure the Windows host PC can access the host IT network via an Ethernet connection or wirelessly. The Solstice pod provides network options built into the pod's configuration panel, including Ethernet and wireless capabilities that can be configured separately. Mersive recommends attaching the pod to the host network via Ethernet when there is Ethernet access available in the meeting room. When connection via Ethernet is not possible, the pod can be attached to the host network wirelessly as a wireless client. To do this, enable the pod's wireless network card in the Network tab of the configuration panel, and then enter the host network's SSID and password and hit Apply. Regardless of which method is used, wired or wireless, if the pod is only attached to a single host network, Mersive highly recommends disabling the other network card on the pod as a best practice. For initial configuration of the Solstice pod, note that units ship with both the wireless access point and Ethernet port enabled. In terms of workflow, this means you have two options for configuring a pod. You can 1. Either connect your laptop to the pod's SSID, or 2. Plug the unit into an existing host network via Ethernet and access that host network via your laptop. Alternatively, you can also configure the pod directly by plugging in a USB mouse and keyboard and accessing the local configuration panel by clicking the Solstice icon in the bottom right corner of the display interface. In addition to attaching the pod to a single host network, the pod also supports the ability to attach to two networks simultaneously, such as a corporate network and a guest network. This is possible because the pod includes both Ethernet and wireless network cards, with a firewall between the network cards for security. We call this dual network mode, and this capability is a valuable differentiator of Solstice when the use case requires support for collaboration among corporate and guest users in the same meeting. For step-by-step instructions for how to set up dual network mode, as well as more information about other network deployment options, please report to the Solstice Pod and Solstice Windows Software Network Deployment Guides in the Mersive Customer Support Portal. Configuring network ports. Once the network mode is selected and configured, and the Solstice pods and Windows software licenses are on the network, the next step is to ensure the correct ports are open on the network to enable Solstice to communicate over the network. Here are the network ports Solstice uses broken down by which Solstice capabilities they support. Note that Solstice base ports are configurable and can be set to any 3 consecutive network ports via the base port configuration option in the configuration panel. However, other than the Solstice base ports, the other Solstice ports are not configurable and must be open on the network in order to support the capabilities listed. Configure user and network security settings. Once the Solstice pods and Windows software host PCs are on the network, it's important to make sure both network and user security settings are configured. In this video, we'll provide a quick summary of these options. For more information about security options as well as recommended security standards, please refer to the Solstice User Reference Guides and the Solstice Baseline Security Standards, BSS. User security settings regulate how users attain access to the Solstice display. The user access control options available from Solstice can be set in the configuration panel and include Open, Screen Key, Password, and Moderator mode. Additionally, the option to Determine at Runtime will allow users in the room to pick which security option best suits their meeting. Mersive recommends Screen Key or Determine at Runtime for most use cases. In addition to securing user access to the meeting room display, Solstice also supports the ability to password protect access to the Solstice configuration panel. Mersive recommends setting a password at the time of deployment in the configuration panel to prevent unauthorized users from accessing and changing Solstice configuration options. Mersive also recommends you set the same password for every display for ease of management when the deployment includes multiple rooms. Be sure to record the Solstice configuration password in a secure location. On the network side, all network communications to and from Solstice Enterprise Edition pods and Windows software licenses can be encrypted using an RSA-SHA cipher and a 2048-bit private key. This network security option is enabled in the Solstice dashboard and is only supported for Solstice Enterprise Edition pods and Windows software licenses. To learn more about Solstice Enterprise Edition, please visit the link below. Solstice Display Discovery refers to the ability for a user to see a list of displays on the network when they open the Solstice app on their device. By listing Solstice displays available for connection, Display Discovery enables users to simply click to connect to the desired display, instead of having to enter the 13-character IP address of the display. The first step to enabling Display Discovery is to set intuitive display names for each Solstice display. Solstice displays are usually named after the room they're in, such as Front Conference Room or Classroom 119. Display names can be designated and changed via the Solstice configuration panel. Once the displays are named, the next step is to ensure the names appear for users to see in the client apps on their devices. Solstice provides a few ways to make this happen. By default, Solstice utilizes a broadcast discovery mechanism that will just work out of the box on many small, non-enterprise networks. However, larger enterprise networks often prohibit the use of UDP broadcasts or multicast network traffic, which means the default broadcast discovery mechanism will not work. In these cases, Mersive provides an alternative discovery mechanism called the Solstice Directory Service, which doesn't rely on UDP broadcasts or multicast traffic. Solstice Directory Service, or SDS, is a separate software program that runs on a Windows PC on the network or in a Windows server environment. Once the SDS software is running on a host, PC, or server, the SDS host IP address must be entered into the configuration settings of the Solstice pods and Windows software host PCs. For more information and access to the SDS software, visit mersive.com/land/get-SDS and refer to the deployment resources documents listed in the Before You Deploy section of this video. Once the first 4 deployment steps are complete, you should run a few simple tests to validate that Solstice is fully operational on the network. These tests represent final checks in the deployment process to ensure that end users can walk into the meeting room and start collaborating. The first test is to connect a PC-based client using a web browser. Open a browser on the Windows or OS X laptop and enter the IP address shown on the welcome screen of a Solstice display. You should see a Connect button. Once clicked, the client application should download. When launched, it should automatically connect to the Solstice display. Next, validate Display Discovery. Disconnect from the Solstice display in the Solstice client application. The Discovery panel should appear with a list of Solstice displays available for connection. You can click Clear to remove displays from your most recently used list. The third item is to test desktop sharing of business applications. Connect to a Solstice display and share the desktop of your client device in the Solstice client interface. Move windows and content on the client desktop. Open documents in PowerPoint. You should see that your desktop is updated live on the Solstice display, and transitions between slides and changes to documents are immediately visible on the display. Now test desktop share with video. Open a browser while sharing your desktop and play a web video. Do the same with a video you've downloaded to your desktop. You should see about 22 to 30 frames per second from a 1080p resolution device, and audio should be synchronized. Next, move to mobile and share your Android 5.0 or better device screen. Download the Solstice app from the Play Store to an Android mobile device. Make sure that device is on the network with your Solstice host. Open the Solstice client and tap the Solstice display name. Next, select Mirror My Screen and make sure the device's screen appears on the display. These 5 steps cover the major factors to consider when deploying Solstice. However, there are a few additional considerations we think you should keep in mind. Firstly, if the deployment involves 10 or more rooms, we want to remind you that the Solstice dashboard will make ongoing management of the deployment much easier. The Solstice dashboard provides centralized one-to-many management of all the Solstice rooms from one or multiple Solstice admin PCs. The dashboard is most often utilized by the IT team or other technology managers to monitor the status of the Solstice deployment and make changes when necessary without the requirement of going room to room to do so. You can learn more and download the Solstice dashboard from mersive.com/land/get Solstice dashboard. Note the Solstice dashboard is compatible with Enterprise Edition pods and Windows software licenses. To learn more and upgrade to Solstice Enterprise Edition, visit the link provided. Another important consideration when deploying Solstice is the network environment. Because Solstice leverages the host network, poor network conditions can adversely affect the performance of Solstice in the meeting room. We suggest you verify that the host network has good Wi-Fi coverage in the Solstice meeting rooms, and you should also be aware that streaming performance of Solstice will vary based on the performance and capabilities of the host network. For recommended network bandwidth and other performance specifications, please refer to the Solstice Deployment Quick Start Guide. Lastly, we want to recommend configuring and verifying Solstice network settings before physically installing the Solstice units in their meeting spaces. Because the pod is a small form factor device, many of our customers choose to mount the units behind their Solstice displays or above their projectors. When the displays and projectors are then mounted in the meeting rooms, accessing the pods physically can become infeasible. Thus, you should ensure that network access to the units is established before physically installing the pods. Solstice brings cutting-edge collaboration capabilities to any type of meeting space at an affordable price by leveraging existing mobile and network infrastructure. And Solstice provides a large degree of configurability to meet the requirements of a broad range of use cases. While these two things set Solstice apart, they also require Solstice to be set up and configured correctly in order for a deployment to be successful. By following the instructions provided in this video, you can ensure that Solstice is configured properly for the use case and that the Solstice deployment is successful from day one. Thank you for watching the Solstice product training series. You should now have a strong understanding of end-user features as well as the IT management capabilities of the Solstice product suite. For more information about Solstice, please visit mersive.com/solstice.